The scene bristles with a sense of drama. Two men striding side by side across the countryside in a race against time. One of them is a young Galilean carpenter preacher named Jesus. The other is an older, distinguished ruler of the synagogue named Jairus. Just a few moments earlier, Jairus had come rushing up to Jesus and cried out, "Lord, my little daughter is at the point of death. Will you please come to help her?" And Jesus, who never disappoints any of us, didn't disappoint Jairus either. The two of them turned and began to race to see if they could outrun death to that little girl. As they were on the way, suddenly they encountered messengers who had been sent from the home of Jairus. The messengers pulled Jairus aside very calmly but very seriously, and they said to him, "Jairus, we have bad news. Your daughter is dead. It's too late. There's no need to trouble Jesus anymore. He might have been able to help earlier, but now it's too late. It's over. It's finished. It's all done. Death has been decisive. She's crossed that portal from which no one ever returns. Do you hear what we're saying, Jairus? Give it up and come on home. Your little girl is dead." That was the message. Now, what did Jesus do at that moment? Did he turn and begin to offer words of condolence to this heartbroken father? Did he reach out with some word or even gesture of human sympathy? No. No, Mark writes, it's so incredible I can hardly believe, but it's right here. Mark writes, Jesus ignored what they said. He ignored that message. Why? Well, Jesus understood that Jairus had 2 ears on the side of his head, like all of us do. And Jesus understood that with those ears, Jairus had heard the message. His daughter was dead. But Jesus also understood that Jairus had a third ear, the ear of his heart. And Jesus wanted Jairus to hear in that ear a different message, the message of life. And so Jesus said to Jairus, "Do not be afraid. Just keep on believing." Isn't that incredible? 2 little phrases, hardly more than 2 words. And that's all the answer Jesus has in the face of the harsh reality of death. Do not be afraid. Just keep on believing. Well, imagine, if you can, what a predicament Jairus found himself in at that point. I mean, put yourself in his shoes. He'd just gotten word that his daughter was dead. And now Jesus is saying to him, do not be afraid, keep on believing. Do you see what this moment was for him? It was a moment of choice, the moment of ultimate choice. He was at the precipice point of the human existence. He was on the razor's edge of eternity. He was at the watershed of faith. He was being forced to make the ultimate choice in life. Would he listen to the word of the messengers, the word which said death, or would he listen to the word of Jesus, the word which said life? Which would he do? Which would you do? Good question. You see, understand, please, that this little vignette from Scripture contains the very essence of our human existence. It's all right here. Because you see, all around us, the message is whispered in 1,000 different ways that death has the last word in life. And here, Jesus whispers in the ear of our hearts a different message. A message which says, faith is supreme and life is hope. And the choice is ours, yours and mine. Will we live our lives on the assumption that death is final, that ultimately decay and extinction will win the day? Or will we live our lives on the assumption that life is hope and that ultimately God will prevail? Which will it be? Will we listen with the ears on our heads to the word of the world? Or will we listen with the ear of our heart to the word of Jesus? Before we lunge after an answer, I think it is very important for us to begin to listen clearly to the messages we are receiving from the world around us, to hear how this great choice is being spelled out in our everyday experience. Will you join me in that just for a moment? First, we need to listen to the message we receive from the physical world. You know, when we look at the world of nature, the physical world around us, so many times the message we get in return is the message of death. We look at places where once there had been great forests, but now instead of virgin timber, we see only the scalped surface of the earth. We look at furrowed fields, their brows furrowed by erosion, and we remember that what once was fertile has now been simply stripped away and carried off to the sea. We look at once crystal clear springs, now so polluted that fish cannot swim there. We drive out through rolling hills, once rich and royal green with citrus groves, but now after killer freezes, nothing more than wastelands with barren, twisted trees stuck like ghostly antlers into the earth. Yes, wherever we turn in the physical world, so many, many times, the message we receive is that things are dying. It's even true with our own bodies. You know how it is. When we look in the mirror, before we put on the paint and the powder and the polish, we see the spreading wrinkles and the little crow's feet around the eyes, and they're tattletale signals that we are engaged in a 60, 70, 80, maybe 90-year process of dying. And there are some people who are so unnerved by the message. I think here of Marlene Dietrich, the movie star. She is well beyond her allotted 70 years and 10. And I suppose that you could say, if the light is just absolutely right, and if the makeup is all precisely and properly in place, I suppose you could say she looks young. In any case, she is trying to look young. A reporter asked her what she feared most in life. She replied instantly, death. How sad. Or I think of Simone de Beauvoir, a French woman of enormous intellect, and yet incredibly she spent the whole last half of her life in a futile rebellion against the aging process. So that she wrote at age 57, "The most important fact in my life is that I'm growing old. I do not understand how time, which has no form and substance, can so crush me with such a great weight that I no longer feel I can even breathe. Long before this carcass has been finally sloughed off, I will have died 1,000 times." How very sad. But you know, that was the message delivered to Jairus. The message said, everything, Jairus, everything in this world, everything earthly, everything natural, everything physical, it's all going to die. And now your little daughter has experienced it. It's over. It's finished. She's dead. And right then, Jesus began whispering in the ear of his heart, "Do not be afraid. Just keep on believing." You see, the gospel of Jesus Christ is that not death, but life. Life has the last word. And that's why, over against the messengers to Jairus, and over against Marlene Dietrich, and over against Simone de Beauvoir, I would place a man like Frank Needham. Oh, I wish you knew him. When I had the privilege of serving as his pastor several years back, he was well up into his 80s at that point. And I tell you, he wore his silver hair as a badge of honor. And he wore his faith as evidence of the power in his life. And I'll never forget the day when he said to me, "Preacher, I wouldn't trade the delicious vintage of this maturity of mine for all the 20-year-olds in the world. And I can hardly wait to see what God is yet going to do in the years that are before me." You see, he'd heard down in his third ear, the ear of his heart, he'd heard the message of Jesus. And because of that, he was not afraid. Because of that, he could keep on believing. But then next, we need to listen to the message we receive from the historical world of which we are a part. History has 1,000 voices whispering to us, things are dying. There are whole nations which once accomplished great things in civilization, and now they exist where? Only on the dusty pages of the history books. Arnold Toynbee, the historian, cataloged 21 different civilizations which climbed to the pinnacle of prominence in the earth and then simply faded away into oblivion. What will the list ultimately contain? 40, 80, 100, it doesn't matter. The message is the same. Nations die, movements die, civilizations die. The message of history is things are dying. Christianity knows something about that. Let's remember, please, that Christianity is built upon one whose existence is historical fact. He came, he lived, he worked, he played. He had scarcely begun his ministry, just 3 years, no more than that. He'd scarcely begun it, and history cut him down. It all happened in 1 week, one terrible, bloody week. 1 week in history, and history impaled him on a cross. Yes, the message is writ large on the pages of history. Things are dying. And there are so many people in the face of that who then begin to say in their lives, well, I mean, you'd better get what you can get while you can get it. You better compromise what you will while you can. You better cut your losses and enjoy the good things of life while you're still able. Let's remember that history is winding down like a tired old clock, and ultimately it will all come to absolutely nothing. That's the message we hear. But there is the whisper of Jesus. A whisper which says to us that history is not what Edward Gibbon called it, nothing more than just the record of the follies and the crimes and the misfortunes of humankind. History is not a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury signifying nothing. History is not one long sob of despair. No, history is his story. History is, remember the one who was impaled upon that cross. Remember, please, 3 days later, the tomb was empty. And the message is that history does not only die, history also comes to new life. John Ruskin once described a sermon as 30 minutes to raise the dead. And that's my task. Week after week after week to stand in this place and deliver to you the message of life. Oh yes, we live in a world of terrible tension. We live in a world where the pall of destruction, be it nuclear or otherwise, hangs heavy in the air. We live in a world where things do seem to be dying all about us. But my task, by the power of history's greatest fact, Jesus Christ, my task is to spend 30 minutes week after week after week reminding you to keep on believing. To keep on believing that this is our Father's world. The battle is not yet done. Jesus who died will be satisfied, and one day earth and heaven shall be one. Keep on believing. Do not be afraid, no matter what the flow of history may sweep around us in life. Just keep on believing. But then we must listen to the message we receive from our personal world. There are there not, those dark nights of the human soul? There are those shadowed moments in life. There are those times when the problems mount up like Everest and threaten to overwhelm us. There are those times when we whisper, if only to ourselves, when we whisper, I wish I were dead. And in moments like that, what we're saying is, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know where to go. I've hit a blank wall, a dead end. I am immobilized by the difficulties. That's what we're saying. And I want to suggest to you that surely is precisely how Jairus felt at that moment when the messenger said to him, your daughter is dead. He must have been frozen to the spot, stunned by the news, paralyzed by the problem, traumatized by the tragedy, unable to cope with it all, ready to give up, ready to throw in the towel. We know the feeling, don't we? But don't we know also that sometimes, in surprising ways, maybe it's in the words of a sermon, or maybe it's in a quiet time of prayer, or maybe it's in some book that we read, or maybe it's at the crest of a mountain at sunset, or maybe it's when someone you love holds you very close. Sometimes, in those surprising, unexpected moments, something happens way down deep inside, and we begin to feel that we can live again. It's that God-given will to live. It's that voice of Jesus speaking in the ear of our hearts and delivering to us an indomitable determination. And in that moment, we know it's true. In that moment, we know that no matter what happens, we will never give up. I am learning that all over again from my dad. Some of you, maybe even many of you will know that my mother is a victim of Alzheimer's disease. And as that disease has taken its inexorable march through a once powerful and vital life, she is at the point where her mental capacities are now so completely destroyed that she can no longer communicate. She has returned to what I think I would call an infant stage, where she can no longer tend to her personal needs. All she can do is what, well, like infants, all she can do is cry. My dad is with her every day at mealtime. He feeds her every single bite, just like she used to feed me every single bite. And then he sits and talks with her for a while, just talks. She can't respond. Sometimes she does speak words, but they're just words. They're nonsense. They have no meaning at all, just words. And I've watched my dad in the midst of all this, and I've seen what it's doing to him. And I said to him, Dad, how can you keep doing this? Don't you sometimes feel like giving up? And he looked at me, and the fire of faith that has always burned in his eyes was burning still. And he said, give up? No. I still love her, and I still have faith, and I don't understand it all, but I still believe. And don't you ever forget that. I won't forget that, Dad. And don't you ever forget that either. No matter what, keep on. Build your life upon your faith in Jesus Christ, and plunge that faith deep down into your heart. And then live every single day on the power of that faith. And never, I repeat, never, never let it go. Keep on believing. Well, two men, Jesus and Jairus, on their way to the home of Jairus. When they got there, the people laughed at Jesus. Imagine that. Laughed at him because he had faith in the face of the reality of death. They laughed at him. They ridiculed him. And Jesus at that point, and please catch the power of the moment, Jesus at that point put everyone else out of the house. And then he took that little girl's mom and that little girl's dad, And he took his 3 disciples, and he walked into the place where the little girl was. And he reached down, and he picked up in his own hand the little lifeless hand of that 12-year-old girl. And he gripped it. And he said, "Talitha Kumi, little girl, get up." And the Bible says the little girl rose. Please, oh please, my beloved, no matter what you may encounter in life, no matter what hurts or hazards, no matter what trials or tragedies, please remember that you can never be finally defeated in life unless you surrender. You can never be ultimately beaten in life unless you give up. Please, do not be afraid. No matter what, no matter when, no matter why, no matter how, just keep on believing. 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 Keep on. Keep on. Keep on. Keep on. Keep on. Keep on believing. Keep on. Believing.